Okay, I will admit I'm a little afraid to talk about this because Steven Universe as a show inspires a lot of passion on the internet, either passionate love or passionate hatred. And I've come across people on both sides. I've tended to fluctuate. There's stuff about the show I really get into. There's stuff of it I really can't stand. And ultimately what I'm gonna say starting off is these are just my opinions. I have no disrespect towards the cast and crew. I have no disrespect towards the fan base. But these are my opinions. I may disagree with you on a few things. So just take it as you will. I'll start by talking a little bit about the show. In that, like I said, I've held back talking about this because ultimately it's really not the kind of show I get into. I'll tell you what I like about it. I love the music. I like the colors. I like the lighting. I have a lot of respect for it. It's very groundbreaking in many ways, especially for how explicitly queer it is, which is awesome. Me personally, it doesn't reflect my personal experiences as a whole, but there are elements that I certainly do relate to. And it's done so much good for so many other people. But I have issues with the storytelling. I find the pacing a little too slow. I've seen too many filler episodes. I got into the show because so many people I knew in school were really into it, and they were saying, you gotta watch this, you've gotta watch this. And I'd say, oh, what's it about? It's really hard to explain. And now that I've seen a good chunk of it, I've seen most of the show, I've skipped over a lot of it, but I've gotten to the most important plot points. I've seen the movie. It is hard to explain. I guess the best way I can describe it is a half-human, half-alien, gem-based, a hybrid half-human, half-gem boy must protect the world from gem-based villains. That's the best I can do in these few seconds. The world building's quite interesting, but this is probably going to be a longer video. I find the pacing a little slow. I like the stuff with the mythology and the world and the mystery of what's going on. I find interesting, but it takes a really long time to get there, which is frustrating for me. I like to get to the point and go and understand the characters, but it doesn't. It's very mellow. It takes its time, and after a while I did get frustrated with it, but I kept powering through because so many people were saying, oh, this is when it gets good, this is when it gets good. I don't always get into the characters because so many episodes are very, very mundane. Oh, Steven's home alone. Oh, Lapis and Peridot are running a car wash. And I personally don't get into the characters enough to want to watch them do that. I also frustrated with the fact that the show really punishes some characters for their mistakes, but then lets others go scot-free. Early on, the show really punished Pearl for her devotion to Rose Quartz, now Pink Diamond, but it never, at least early on, it does more now, but even then I felt it took too long to address that Rose Quartz screwed over a lot of people, and I felt the show was a little too hard on Pearl and not hard enough on Rose Quartz. Even now, having seen later episodes, I don't find that the show really holds the character accountable. And I've seen the backstory, but even then, I feel like this character still is never held accountable for her actions when so many other characters have been, which gets very, very frustrating. But it's done so much good for other people, so that's great. It just, as a whole, doesn't for me. The movie, I did like more than I thought I was going to. While it does follow the same formula, Steven talks down the villain and uses the power of empathy, and the villain calms down and becomes a friend. Again, I see that so much in the show, and I think personally, no, there are some awful, awful people in the world. Sometimes you just gotta use violence. Come on, Steven, punch something. And that is not the case here. Again, different worldviews. But I did like the villain this time. I thought it was a fun character, Spinel, who, when the poster was released, a lot of people compared her to Jenny from My Life as a Teenage Robot. And then when you see some of the original designs, you got a lot of comparisons to Mickey Mouse. There were cool ideas in there. I think Steven Universe has really good ideas to it. It's got very sweet ideas, very inclusive ideas. It's very idealistic in many ways, but I find it's not always realistic, but I don't think that's the point. Again, I think maybe I find it a little too saccharine. And I think I just want to be angry. Maybe that's what it is. And there was something in the movie that did bother me, where Steven's talking to Spinel, and he says, oh, I can't. She says, oh, you can't change how I feel. He says, no, I can't. Only you can. I think, let her be angry, damn it. She has a right. Even if her methods of lashing out at strangers are wrong. I think sometimes the show focuses way too much on the ideas it wants to convey instead of letting characters be characters. Okay, you've heard me complaining a lot. The music is amazing. The idea for the movie is very, very interesting. I did find it very fun and it's a good recap of what a lot of these characters went through. It's very much an hour, 22 minutes of, okay, here are who these characters are, how far they've come. And the theme of the movie is about change and moving on. At least I'm gathering that. Because that's what happens is, this new villain, Spinel, comes in and immediately poofs all the gems. Even Steven, who loses all his powers, all of the three major crystal gems, Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl, they get reverted back to their original forms. They get reset to their default modes. Amethyst is just a mimic with no identity of her own. Garnet starts off as Ruby and Sapphire and becomes this very cute, innocent character, and then Pearl becomes ultra subservient to the first person she sees, which happens to be Steven's dad. It was really cool to see just how far they've come over the 5 seasons and where they started from. Also, yeah, the show doesn't focus as much on Garnet and Amethyst's development as they do with Pearl, I've noticed. And I thought, no, they had some good stuff, particularly Amethyst, who I found very interesting, but extremely underused. I know, I feel like I'm bitching a lot. This is why I don't talk about this as much on my channel, because I don't want to just be complaining about stuff. But I thought, oh, Spinel's backstory was very much reminiscent of Jessie from Toy Story, which is my ultimate saddest Pixar moment. So, Rose Quartz, or Pink Diamond, essentially outgrew her. Spinel's made to be a playmate, very clingy one, been there, who really, all she wants to do is be a good friend and entertain, but Pink Diamond outgrows her and essentially just leaves her abandoned for 6,000 years. And never even thinks to come back, which, yeah, I do not like that character at all. Oh, I felt bad for Spinel, but I also felt some of the pacing and her story arc felt a little rocky to me. I thought, but she is a very tragic villain, and she does, you actually see the insecurity and the self-loathing in her. Even when she's over the top happy, you get it where it comes from. And you get how it can be annoying to people, but you also get the tragedy of it, because I think a lot of people have been in that situation of being abandoned and betrayed by someone they trusted, or a friend outgrew them and just ghosted them in a very cruel way. People are cruel. People don't communicate very well. So I find her, of the villains, I find her the most relatable. So far, yeah, I would say so. And she gets some really cool songs. I like her villain song, Other Friends. It has this very, very, very cool video game sound to it. It sounds like something you hear on a boss level. So, very electronic, very catchy, very, I don't want to say nostalgic, but very familiar. It's actually really interesting how this and Rocco are very much about deal with change and moving on. But I think Steven Universe deals with baggage and trauma that much more heavily in a way that really hits a nerve with people. And that's why people either love or hate it or fluctuate. I'd actually really, really love to read a biography on Rebecca Sugar's life because they seem like a very interesting person. You get snippets here and there, but I feel like a whole biography on their life, I would be fascinated by it because I'd be fascinated I'm always fascinated whenever I hear behind the scenes of, this came from, Spinell's backstory as an abandoned playmate. That was inspired by, I left a stuffed, they say, I left a stuffed bunny out in the garden, and then one day when I was a kid, and 6 months later, I found it again. It was all bleached from the sun. It was faded. I was fascinated by that. Rebecca Sugar even said in an interview recently, I love history, but I don't really like nostalgia very much. I have a complicated relationship with old cartoons. So I find that fascinating because Spinell's design is very much Max Fleischer, Mickey Mouse, 1930s. Very different from the rest of the Steven Universe cast. You have this really cool rubber hose animation on her. So it was cool. Yeah, it was fascinating. I like, again, the songs. I'm just going to gush about how great the songs are. The animation, this really felt like the animation was already good, but it went up a notch. And I very much appreciate how the stakes felt bigger, and Steven even saying, you know what, this is just going to be my life. A new gem angry at me for stuff my mom did, stuff that had nothing to do with me. And I'm gonna have to deal with that. Happily ever after might never come. Which is interesting. It was retconned, because they do recognize their own tropes. The show is pretty self-aware, but everything did change by singing. Ultimately, it feels like there was a very passionate team behind that, and regardless of what I think of the show, the issues that I personally take with it, I can respect the fact that it is a very original voice and there is a ton of passion behind it. So it's clearly made an impact on so many people's lives, whether we admit it or not, or don't want to acknowledge it. It is a really fascinating show from really fascinating people whose stories we haven't seen before. There is a very interesting mythos to it. Whereas, even though it's not my show, it's a very fascinating one. And it's definitely one that inspires a lot of conversations.